Never brag about your progress or tell people your plans. It was a quiet afternoon in a small, tucked-away village where everyone seemed to know everyone else. A young man, let's call him Wei, had just returned from the city, carrying a sense of accomplishment. He had achieved something few in his village had. He was finally making it. Wei had grown tired of the quiet murmurs that came with living in the shadows of others' expectations. He wanted to prove himself, to show the world, no, the village, that he was more than the boy who had left years ago. So he began to speak, not loudly, but enough for those nearby to hear. He spoke about his new job, his new connections, the opportunities he was about to seize. What happened next wasn't what anyone, including Wei, expected. As the words left his lips, something shifted. It wasn't admiration he received, but a sense of subtle distance. The smiles, once warm and welcoming, turned stiff. The villagers who had seen him grow up suddenly felt a strange chill in the air. You see, in a world where people judge you not by what you say, but by what they feel about what you're saying, bragging about your progress can be more dangerous than you think. Wei's story is more than just an unfortunate turn of events. It's a powerful, almost hidden lesson most people fail to understand until it's too late. What if the very act of sharing your success could bring your downfall? What if telling others your plans was the first step in sabotaging your dreams? There's something crucial missing from the way we see success. But to uncover it, you'll need to hear the rest of Wei's story. Do you really know who's watching you, even when you think no one is? And what do you think happens when your success becomes someone else's secret? The next morning, Wei sat on the weathered wooden bench outside the local tea house, his hands resting on his knees. The sound of the wind rustling through the trees seemed almost surreal. The once familiar village now felt foreign, as though it belonged to someone else. He had built himself a life outside, a life of connections, of opportunities, of promises that he thought could change everything. But now, the village, his roots, seemed to reject him. They no longer saw him as one of their own. The laughter from the nearby market felt distant. It was as though it belonged to someone else too. The old man who ran the market stall, the woman who sold herbs, the children running through the narrow alleyways. They all seemed to be carrying on with their lives in a way that no longer felt like part of his world. Wei had always known that success meant something different in the village. The elders taught him that to live well, to survive, was to be humble. To be quietly content, to not call attention to your achievements, to never show off. But Wei had pushed past that. He wanted to share, to show them that things had changed for him, that his dreams were no longer far-fetched. What he hadn't realized was that by speaking out, he had entered a silent battle. Not a battle of words, but a battle of perception. The moment you declare that you've made it, you open yourself up to judgment in ways you can't predict. The people who were once your friends could suddenly become strangers. The ones who admired you could turn to envy. And that's when the rumors started. Wei didn't know who started it, but whispers spread through the village like wildfire. He's become arrogant, some said. He thinks he's better than us now, others muttered. The worst part? He hadn't bragged. He had simply shared his excitement, his plans. He had felt the need to speak, to express the hope that had filled him. But instead of admiration, something darker grew in the air. Slowly but surely, Wei began to notice the subtle shift, the sideways glances, the tight-lipped smiles. The elders, those who had once mentored him, began avoiding him. He didn't understand why. He had never meant to distance himself from them. Yet, they seemed to pull away, as though his very presence reminded them of something they had worked so hard to suppress. In a place where everyone valued silence, his words had broken a sacred rule. The distance grew. The joy he once felt in coming back to the village was replaced with uncertainty. Wei couldn't understand it. Why wasn't anyone happy for him? Why did they look at him like he had done something wrong? Then, one afternoon, as the sun began to set behind the distant mountains, the truth finally came to him. He was sitting with his old friend Mei under the shade of a large tree. The air smelled of earth and jasmine, and the quiet chirping of birds filled the space between them. "You've changed, Wei," Mei said softly, her eyes watching the birds fly overhead. "I know," Wei said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. He had said it to himself 1,000 times, but hearing it from Mei made it real in a way he hadn't expected. I don't mean just, the city life, May continued. It's something else, something quieter. Wei looked at her, unsure of what she meant. What do you mean? There's something about telling people your plans before they happen. It's like you're giving them power over you. You think they'll support you, but in reality, you've opened a door for them to decide whether you're worthy of your dreams, May explained. Wei sat back, his mind racing. He hadn't seen it like that. To him, telling his story was a sign of pride, but to the villagers, it was a sign of arrogance. In their world, ambition should be a quiet, personal matter. Speaking too loudly about your dreams was like giving them away to others, letting them judge whether or not you had earned the right to succeed. The more Wei thought about it, the more the realization settled within him. He had done something unthinkable by sharing his ambitions, his plans, his successes, and the results spoke for themselves. The village, his community, had rejected him, not because of what he had achieved, but because he had forgotten the most important rule. Success is silent. The moment you make it known, the moment you broadcast your plans, you risk losing control over them. Wei's story had become a warning, a cautionary tale that stretched far beyond the village walls. It wasn't just about the people around you. It was about protecting your progress from the energy of others. Sometimes keeping your dreams to yourself is the only way to truly make them come true. But the story didn't end there. Wei learned that to move forward, he needed to change his approach. It wasn't about being ashamed of his success. It was about owning it quietly, with grace, and letting his actions speak louder than his words. And that's when the village began to see him differently. Slowly, he stopped talking about his future plans. He let his actions do the talking instead. As time passed, the villagers who had once turned away from him started to take notice, not of his words, but of his results. Weeks turned into months, and the whispers about Wei's progress slowly stopped. He was no longer the boy who had bragged about his success. He was the man who had earned it. His silence became his greatest asset. His humility, the key to his ultimate success. But there was a twist to this story, a lesson that Wei could never forget. In the end, it wasn't about keeping your plans to yourself for fear of others. It was about understanding the delicate balance between ambition and humility. To succeed, you must move with intention, not broadcast every step you take. Your actions should lead the way, and when the time is right, the world will notice. The takeaway: success is silent. The quieter you are about your progress, the more you will achieve. Speak less, do more, and let your actions reveal the story that words never could. Final CTA. Think about Wei's journey. Have you ever found yourself bragging about your success only to be met with unexpected distance? Drop a comment with a phrase from the story that resonated with you, something that made you rethink your own approach. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Someone you know needs to hear this lesson.